When you picture war, what do you see? Collapsed buildings, smoke-filled skies, soldiers on patrol? For those who live through it, the most haunting image is often silence. The silence of invisible victims, of unrecorded tragedies, of injustices that never make the news. Human rights organizations exist to break that silence. They bear witness where the world looks away, shining a light into the darkest corners of human suffering, corners that power, politics, and propaganda would rather keep hidden. Before we go any further, I want to ask you to pause for a moment. If you're interested in the stories that rarely reach the headlines, if you want to understand the hidden consequences of war and explore the ethical dilemmas of global power, then please subscribe to this channel. Your support fuels our investigations, allows us to keep unearthing these truths, and keeps this vital conversation alive. Now let's turn our attention back, because what you're about to hear might challenge not only what you know, but what you feel. Human rights organizations operate at the intersection of law, ethics, and morality. They are our watchdogs, investigators, and advocates. Their mission is simple to say, but incredibly difficult to practice. Document violations, expose perpetrators, and push for accountability. But their path is filled with political resistance, bureaucratic hurdles, and constant ethical challenges. Think about an active armed conflict. Governments might justify military operations with national security or strategic necessity. But within these campaigns, it's often civilians who bear the brunt of the violence. Families are displaced, children are orphaned, and entire communities are destabilized. This is where human rights organizations step in. They gather evidence, eyewitness testimony, satellite imagery, medical records, to establish not just what happened, but who is responsible. They translate raw human suffering into verifiable, actionable knowledge. The task is enormous. Conflict zones are chaotic, access is often restricted, and the parties involved may actively try to obstruct any investigation. Investigators risk their lives navigating checkpoints, hostile territory, and confronting armed groups. But they persist, guided by a principle that's bigger than politics: the belief that injustice, if left unrecorded, is injustice unchallenged. Organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International don't just rely on their own investigators. They depend on vast networks of local contacts, journalists, and volunteers. Every piece of evidence has to be meticulously corroborated because making an accusation carries enormous weight: political fallout, international condemnation, and sometimes even retaliation against the witnesses who bravely spoke out. This rigor isn't just academic, it's a moral necessity when human lives and global credibility are at stake. Their reports often uncover patterns that statistics alone can't show. Casualty counts and territorial gains don't capture the lived experience of violence. A massacre, a forced displacement, or the denial of medical care might be completely invisible in a military report. Human rights documentation transforms a personal story into hard evidence, a victim's voice into powerful testimony, and an allegation into a call for legal and ethical accountability. And we cannot overstate the ethical dimension of this work. These organizations face constant dilemmas. Do they report a finding now or wait for more evidence? Do they expose a perpetrator and risk retaliation against a community, or protect anonymity and lose a chance at justice? Every single decision carries immense moral weight. Investigators are constantly balancing the principles of impartiality and accuracy against the urgent ethical imperative to prevent further harm. Consider the challenge of documenting civilian casualties in modern conflicts. Drones, airstrikes, and urban warfare make it incredibly difficult to determine who is responsible. Organizations have to verify who carried out an attack, who was in the chain of command, and what the immediate and long-term effects were. A single misreported fact could delegitimize all their evidence, endanger their staff, or undermine years of advocacy. So, accurate reporting is both a technical and an ethical tightrope walk. And the fieldwork is only half the battle. Human rights organizations must also navigate a treacherous political landscape. Governments can deny them access, restrict visas, or label their investigators as hostile agents. Militaries may try to discredit their reports or manipulate public perception. Even media outlets can sometimes prioritize a sensational headline over nuanced evidence. In the face of all this pressure, these organizations have to maintain their credibility, their rigor, and their independence. But exposure is just the first step. Advocacy, legal action, and public mobilization are just as crucial. These reports are used to inform policymakers, international bodies like the UN, and courts. They provide the basis for sanctions, trials, and interventions designed to stop abuses. This isn't passive documentation, it is an active, moral engagement with power. The goal isn't just to record what happened, but to create real consequences for those who violate basic human dignity. The challenges are getting even harder in modern warfare. With non-state actors, irregular combatants, and proxy forces, it's becoming more difficult to assign blame and ensure accountability. Civilian populations are increasingly targeted, whether intentionally or incidentally, by strategies that blur the line between combatant and non-combatant. Investigators have to determine not only what constitutes a violation, but also what can realistically be done about it within the constraints of international law and diplomacy. Fortunately, technology has revolutionized this work. Satellite imagery, open-source intelligence, and digital forensics allow analysts to track troop movements, verify damage, and identify patterns with unprecedented precision. But technology is not a substitute for moral judgment. Human interpretation, ethical reasoning, and a deep understanding of the context are still central to ensuring that the evidence is credible, balanced, and just. Reporting on human rights is inherently political, but it must remain ethically clear. Exposing wrongdoing can provoke international action, but it can also inflame tensions or endanger witnesses. Navigating these consequences requires moral courage, strategic judgment, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles. These organizations also face intense scrutiny. Critics might accuse them of bias or political interference, but their defenders argue that their meticulous methodology, transparency, and adherence to international standards are what preserve their credibility. The moral argument is simple. The existence of a challenge does not negate the obligation to document injustice, especially when the victims have no voice of their own. History shows us the impact this work can have. Investigations into the wars in Bosnia, Rwanda, and Iraq helped shape international tribunals, influenced policy decisions, and catalyzed humanitarian aid. Evidence collected under the most dangerous conditions created accountability, deterred future violations, and provided a record for victims' families. These organizations transform moral commitment into actionable power. But the challenges are ongoing. Funding is often uncertain, political pressure is constant, and global conflicts are becoming more complex. Human rights organizations have to balance their advocacy with independence, urgency with accuracy, and exposure with the protection of vulnerable people. It is morally demanding, technically intricate, and operationally hazardous work. Yet despite it all, the imperative remains to witness, to record, and to hold power accountable. The stories of the investigators themselves reveal incredible personal courage. In conflict zones, they witness suffering firsthand: the orphaned child, the bombed hospital, the destroyed refugee camp. Each report they write is not just a document, it's a moral assertion that injustice cannot remain hidden. Their work is a call to conscience for the entire global community, a reminder that morality demands engagement, not indifference. And this is where you come in. Public engagement amplifies their impact. When citizens are informed about violations, they can advocate for change, demand accountability, and pressure their governments to act. Subscribing to channels like this, donating to these organizations, and sharing information are not passive acts. They are part of our collective ethical responsibility. The moral weight of war extends beyond soldiers and leaders to all of us, and human rights organizations are the bridge between observation and action. The ultimate goal here is systemic change. By exposing patterns of abuse, advocating for accountability, and influencing policy, these organizations aim to prevent future violations. The work is slow, progress can be incremental, and setbacks are frequent. But the moral imperative remains constant. At the very core of this work is the recognition of our shared humanity. Victims are not statistics, perpetrators are not abstractions, and the global community is bound by a shared responsibility. In a world where power so often obscures justice, these organizations serve as our conscience. They hold a mirror up to governments, challenge our complacency, and insist that human dignity cannot be ignored. Their work is a testament to the enduring power of ethical vigilance in an era of conflict and complexity. It is a call to conscience, a challenge to indifference, and proof that evidence and advocacy can shape a more just world. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue this important work. We'll see you in the next one.